Broadcasting live from the moon and back, this is The Coin Chat, the most trusted voice for all things cryptocurrency. Each week we dissect an important issue and cut through the noise and misinformation out there in the world of blockchain, cryptocurrency, and ICOs, capturing the facts that truly matter to you that will give you an edge in this fast-moving emerging market. The who, what, where, when, and how of what you need to know in crypto to get ahead so you don't get left behind. Now here are your co-hosts, financial and crypto experts Yuri Cataldo and Steve Good.
Hey, this is Steve Good.
And Yuri Cataldo.
Cutting through the noise and misinformation in cryptocurrency to tell you what truly matters.
Yes, we are.
Oh, we're here. We're going to cut through the crap on the noise today because there's a lot of it going on out there.
There always is. But yes, particularly there's some new exciting-ish new noise.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what's exciting is the fact that we're finally seeing some movement in the U.S., specifically around the fact that Representative Warren Davidson from Ohio has called a meeting with Coinbase, Ripple, and a bunch of investment firms like State Street, Union Square Ventures, Andreessen Horowitz, and even the NASDAQ to try to put together a bill to put in front of the Senate to unlock the problem of the whole kind of no innovation in crypto in the U.S. because it's against the law problem with ICOs.
Right. Well, good. It's good that they're getting on top of that and finally doing something about it.
Somebody is from the House of Representatives, so that's a good start. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this, interestingly, and she'd said to me, well, the SEC, this and that, and it's all their fault that the U.S. isn't, really adopting crypto the same way as the rest of the world. And I said, that's not entirely correct, actually. And she said, so why don't you talk about it on the show then and tell people what's going on? So, right. Yuri, would you like to tell us what's going on?
With the U.S. So,
well, you're in the U.S. It's not my problem anymore. I'm over here in the U.K. dealing with Brexit. I don't even know if we'll have we'll have to have our own cryptocurrency because, the pound will be worthless now.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole separate other issue. No, it's good. It's good to see the U.S. actually doing something about it. But, we have decades of exchange law, and unfortunately they happen because there's a lot of scammers out there, and it is the attempt of governments to try to help the average investor not get scammed, which is also why, only recent regulation has happened with accredited investors and the government's trying to allow the average person to be involved in more and more type of investments, but you're right. They just don't want the average Joe six-pack, I guess, in a way, to be scammed by a lot of sophisticated or unsophisticated means. So
like people like me that got scammed, even though I tried desperately not to. And we will talk about this on another episode at some point when we get all of the details together. But right, I mean, that's exactly what I was saying to her as well, is that, what's really problematic in crypto is exactly what the SEC set out back in the 1920s and 30s to protect was, the old grandma that gets a guy knocking on the door saying, just give us like your life savings and we'll you'll make millions and you'll be able to retire very, nicely. And she's lost all her money. And the average person sitting at home that sees an asset and looks at it and says, oh, this is exciting. It turns out to be something that's not an asset. It's not regulated. It's not bonds. It's not equity. It's not currency. And crypto turns out to fall into that same category. And so because it falls outside the bounds of what was regulated, of course, Jay Clayton from the SEC is just trying to do his job, which is to say, hang on, before we let people start jumping in and creating what they claim are utilities, and they probably aren't. They probably are assets.
Right.
Let's just figure it out first. Unfortunately, it is massively stifling the U.S. when it comes to people jumping in and creating ICOs. And we've seen examples of Texas going after ICOs for trying. We've seen Dragon Chain, which was an incubator project, now under investigation from the SEC. And I mean, it's a hard situation because I sometimes make jokes and say, well, the U.S. is like China. I mean, let's face it, if you want to do crypto, leave the country. And I've said that to clients.
Right. You're not wrong, though. I mean, you and I both know, I have a few friends who are working on projects and they've still been stalled out because it's been a year and a half and they
right. Like our friends that were doing the AI project out in LA and they couldn't move the project forward because they were scared of the regulations that would come with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's still in the works, but it's still, who knows when it's actually going to launch
Yeah.
because of regulations.
Or lack of regulations.
Or lack thereof.
Or the usage of previous regulations, which were valid. And the question is whether those regulations are still valid, or do we need to modify them in some way? Arguably, we probably need to find some middle ground. And I think the challenge is, what's the middle ground when crypto is being used as a utility and projects are trying to raise money without actually selling assets in the company like shares?
Mm-hmm.
But it does take us to an interesting point, though, around, this whole crowdfunding market and where it goes, because I've even seen projects that are trying to do fundraising or trying to just use blockchain and create utilities in their platform without doing fundraising. And of course, that's probably fine if you have an existing platform with existing users. But then when you bring new users on board, how do you give them the coin to use within the platform? Presumably, it's just part of the platform itself, and that's true utility without doing fundraising. But if somebody else wants to do fundraising, I mean, in the Kickstarter world or Indiegogo world, of which you know from history and experience, you weren't giving anything away except for maybe, for $500 you get T-shirt and a pair of, whatever.
Right.
And that would be like the most expensive T-shirt ever.
if you're even lucky to get the T-shirt, that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, and I mean, I invested in several different, I was going to call them ICOs, several different crowdfunded projects where I got the promise of goods to come in the future and got nothing. I never got my 3D printer. I never got my my bamboo bicycles for my little kids. They were now too big for the bicycles. It's a shame. And they were cool projects, and I put money in, and I never got anything. Now, would you say, is that a fraud? Is it a scam? Or was it just unlucky? And nobody's bothered to regulate Indiegogo and Kickstarter for, promising nothing or promising something as an asset for cash. And yet now we're getting projects to issue coins for cash, so you have some sort of intrinsic value in that company. And again, it goes right back to the problem. Is it a security now? Is it a promise of using that coin on the platform in the future as a utility? Or is it something else? And should it be traded on exchanges or not? I didn't say that, though.
Of course not.
No.
But you're right. We do. We've got a lot of these new ways to kind of raise money in that sense. But who knows if what's going to happen with Kickstarter and Indiegogo, if that actually will be like an issue that's raised, because I don't know what the statistics are, but I would be curious to see of actual products that get sold and issued.
Well, I'll give a shout out to our friend Gary P, Vodka Man, and Gary and I had a conversation about the fact that T's put money into numerous projects in the past and never received anything from any of them, and just sees the whole thing as one big scam or waste of money that helps projects that potentially could start, but there's no checks and balances on that project, how they spend the money, when they receive the money. At least with a couple of smart contracts in place, you could give them tranches of money, like don't give it all at once, but give it in waves based on delivering certain services. But, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they need our help to advise them on how to fix this. So
definitely. And I know, so being on the other side of that, I worked with a startup who did a Indiegogo campaign, and they still haven't. I stopped working for them a year and a half ago, but they still haven't delivered their sunglasses to the initial groups of investors. And for whatever reason, they were just, the problem oftentimes is just because you have a good idea and you're a smart engineer, it doesn't mean that you're very good at managing your time and money and resources. So that's what really happened with some of these.
And that's no different in the world of crowdfunding for the startup community of what we call ICOs today. But actually, I think part of what we want to cover today would also be around some of the new ways of doing crowdfunding and how it's shifting a bit. Because I think 2018 we've seen has been interesting. We've seen a decline in crowdfunding in the traditional sense of initial coin offering, offer the coin for Ether, which is the traditional way people have done it. And there's been a lot of transitioning that's been going on. And there's a whole load of new acronyms that I see floating around, and I know you've seen floating around. So that's why I thought it'd be good to say, what the fork are all these acronyms in crowdfunding? Because It's confusing.
There's so many new acronyms. When you brought this up, I was like, I have to spend so much time learning these.
Yeah.
Some of these are kind of, and there's some, I'll bring them at the end, are kind of made up, but they're still, it's good to just know about a few of the acronyms.
So what are the made up ones? Let's talk about those first, because those are probably the most exciting.
Some of the made up ones?
Or should we just make some up right now just because we could?
We should. Well, let me give you the made up ones that already exist, and then we can throw in some other ones.
All right, cool.
So IFO and IAO. Can you guess what those are? Those are made up, but what do you think those are? An IFO.
Initial fund offering.
Yeah, initial fork offering. Close, though.
Oh, okay. So an initial fork offering. So that would be like Anonymous Coin that took the Z Classic code base and said, hey, we're going to do another privacy coin, and we'll just give you forked coins.
Yes,
that's my guess.
Exactly what that is. Yes, that's what it is. And this is a term, I found this on Binance. So Binance has claimed this one. So that's where they came from.
But so now, what's the difference between that kind of a initial fork offering and another one where you have a legitimate fork like Ethereum that had to split because of the DAO and created ETC and ETH, and it was a legitimate fork, not because of just the code base, but because of some problems that happened at the coin at the time. Or if a coin were to hard fork because of a code base change that was legitimately required to progress the coin, and some people decided to stay with the old coin and some went with the new one. So are those initial fork offerings or initial disagreement offerings? IDOs.
IDOs, they're definitely IDOs.
We've got IDOs and IFO. So Binance picked this one up. We got IDOs. I do not agree, so I'm going with a different direction. I'm going with the old coin. You can go with the new one.
Exactly. Well, it looks like so they don't like the fork offerings because from an exchange point of view, they describe it as an exchange being forced to support this project, and they see a lot of forks as completely useless. So from their point of view, they hate it because they don't want to support them. They only want to support, I guess, a limited number of coins.
Fair enough. I mean, they're probably getting tons of people coming to them saying, I've got Bitcoin Platinum, Bitcoin Platinum,
right.
Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Super, Bitcoin Latino.
Right, which is a real thing.
Which is unfortunately a real thing, but doesn't sound very real. But anyway, so yeah.
It doesn't.
No.
Right.
But yeah, so they don't want to cover all these different forks. They want projects to effectively do what? Legitimate business, start from scratch, build it up. And if they want to take the code base from a privacy project like Pivx or Dash and spawn a new project using the GitHub repository to get started to make life easier, that's one thing. But actually forking the full coin and giving people the coins from the existing coin, they're not a fan of.
Right.
Okay, so that's one initial fork offering. And from that, we already had a fork called the IDEA, which is the initial disagreement offering, or what did I say? Initial.
Yeah, I think it was initial disagreement offering.
Okay, something like that.
We'll go with it.
Yeah,
something like that. Okay, their other made-up one, an IAO, initial airdrop offering.
So how is go on.
It's the same as an airdrop. They just describe it differently.
So
just in case you're wondering, it's exactly the same as an airdrop. They're just calling it an airdrop offering that will be able to be supported on an exchange.
So what if a project was to initially offer coins in an airdrop before they actually started doing the fundraising because they wanted the coins to show up in people's wallets to draw their attention to the fact they've received a coin they've never heard of, and that would be like a marketing ploy just to get them to come to the project and check it out. But they weren't doing airdrops actively, but they did it passively. I'm coming up with a marketing idea for someone out there. Because too many of the airdrops are sign up to the project and come get your free coins. But what if they did it the other way around and said, let's do an airdrop to a bunch of random people and then announce that you've done an airdrop. And if you want to participate in the project and find out more, come check it out. You've already got some coins in your wallet. You may as well find out what you can do with them. But you can't earn them. They were just given out randomly in advance.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds kind of like, I mean, if they did that on an exchange, then that sounds like a little bit about what Binance is describing this.
Right.
Because what they don't like is to have users install another new wallet to receive an airdrop. So yeah, because part of this says at the very end, if you're going to do one, be sure to work with the big exchanges first.
Oh, that's interesting. So their whole premise around initial airdrop, I was going to call it initial artificial offerings. And I just did another fork. I'm sorry. And so
It's okay.
I think what you're saying is that their whole point is that the airdrops they're describing would be ones that are done within the exchange, as to the ones where if I look in my Mu, I would see some coins just show up in my Ether wallet or my just, normal